Okay, for my bodice I'm using a black cotton velvet here, which I bought from eBay. It is dressmaking cotton velvet in black, brought from Ralston Fabrics, who also have a website under that same name. It's a very nice cotton velvet, very thin, not too heavy, not too chunky. What you don't want is the upholstery velvet, because that's too thick and heavy. A few tips when using and cutting velvets is very important. Because of the nature of velvet, if you brush with your hand the pile of the velvet, you can feel one direction is rough and the other direction is smooth. Now generally, as it's running smoother down this way with the grain line, you'll want the smoothness to run down your bodice, not upwards. So this is the next important thing. When you cut out your pieces, except for the front one, which was done on a centre fold, which I did last, you've obviously got to make sure, I'll just take that centre fold out of the way, save confusing you. Right, I advise very strongly using velvet to cut one piece at a time. Usually you'd be okay on basic cotton fabrics to fold your fabric over and cut it so you've got the reverse side of each one. Due to the nature of velvet moving and the way the fibres react, you really only want to cut one piece at a time, and don't put too many pins in it either. And just remember, when you cut your fabric pieces, you've cut one of each one way, you then want to reverse them over to cut one each in the opposite direction. I can't tell you how many times I've got this wrong sometimes. But there we go, that's what you want to do. One piece at a time, and make sure that you've got each piece running with the same grain line.
We're now going to embroider our design onto our front panel. This is just a practice piece to make sure that the design works, and we're quite happy with that. It's not all the right colours, of course, but it is just a practice. But you cannot hoop velvet at all, whether you put it into an embroidery hoop or whether you put it into a machine hoop, because this is what will happen. That ring that's left behind there is called hoop burn, which means that when you put the velvet into the hoop, it crushes the fibres, and you'll be left with the outline of your hoop, which will never come out. Excuse me. So I'm going to show you a method that is called unhooping. The method I'm going to use involves just putting your stabilizer into your hoop and nothing else. The stabilizer I'm using is iron on, tear away stabilizer, which means on one side it has an adhesive backing which glues itself to the fabric once you heat it up. The second method you can use is to use an ordinary stabilizer, and you can buy a spray can of temporary adhesive. So if you were using the ordinary stabilizer, you'd put it into your hoop, make sure it's tight, and then you would spray your temporary adhesive onto your hoop, and then you would put your velvet over the top where you need to position it into your hoop, and then you would press it down until it's nice and firm, and then what you would do is get some Solvay stabilizer. This is soluble, and as soon as you wet it, it disintegrates. So when you've got your fabric on your hoop, You will then place a piece of solvay on the top, and then you'll put that into your machine and embroider your design. But because I'm using the adhesive stabilizer, what I'm going to do is actually put a warm iron onto the reverse of my hoop, and that will make the glue melt and stick my fabric in my hoop. Right, I don't want to iron directly onto the velvet because I'm going to melt the pile. So what I did is just got a thin piece of cotton, just scrap, placed it over the top and just put the iron in the middle for a few seconds just to hold the fabric. It is now caught onto the stabilizer. Now I'm going to turn the whole thing over, and I'm using a book here because I want to raise the whole hoop off the table so that sits quite nicely on my book. And now I can do a proper ironing to bond my stabilizer to the back of the velvet, like so. And when the whole thing now is turned over, it becomes attached to your stabilizer, and that is ready. What I need now is to cut a piece of solvay and place that on the top of my velvet, and now that is ready to go into my embroidery machine to be embroidered.
And this is our embroidery machine in action. Our embroidery machine is a Janome 350E. We'll let it do the rest. Okay, I've now finished embroidering the front panel and we've done the back panel. Next you want to pin your pieces together and sew them. This is going to have a zip in on the side opening, hence because on the back it's got the big motif, so it was a bit hard to have the back opening. And I've chose to have my zip opening on my right hand side, so you would attach the back piece on that side there on your left, depending on which side you want your zip to be. Next, what you want to do is where you've got your stiffened fabric on the ends, on the side seam, is to just cut it back a bit, because just to cut out the bulk and when you come to put the zip in. Okay, because this is a low fitting bodice and it's got a side opening which makes it a bit more awkward to get as tight as you can, we're going to try a tape method, waist tape, sorry, that you would usually see on corsets or old-fashioned bodices. Would have them if you had a front or back opening. It would help keep the bodice tight around you. We're a bit concerned about with the zip opening we're going to have, if the pressure on the zip, so we thought we would give this a try and see if it helps give some support, and I have tried it. It seems to be working okay at this point, fingers crossed. And as you can see, I've just sewn it over where I've got the boning channels, being very careful because I've obviously threaded my bones through the channels already. Being very careful and sewn either side on every single part. I've not gone straight down. You have to sew either side of your casings. and leave a bit extra to start with. Like, don't leave that much, just leave a bit extra, and then you can fiddle around with it after to where it fits you. Next, you want to take your velvet layer and you want to start pinning it just along the top to the liner with the stiffener fabric in. If you remember earlier, we just cut back the stiffener here, so it's right inside, so we just got these two edges. So it just cuts out the bulk on the side, because obviously the zip will be going in. Right, you want to pin and tack your layers together, making sure as best you can that your seams match your liner at every point, or as close as you can get it. And then just run a tacking stitch right the way to the end. Mum also tried this on me whilst after we tacked it, so that we could pull it straight, and we put some pins in for now just to help keep the bottom in place. What we also had to do is just to get an iron, and on the inside just give it a bit of a press where the bust parts are, on that slight curve that we had on the fronts here. So we had a little bit of a problem there with it crumpling up a bit, but we sorted that out. I'm now going to move on to do the bias binding part at the top. I bought some 19mm wide bias binding. It's olive green satin bias binding. I got it off a seller off eBay, but you can find many sites selling bias binding, and this one was olive green. Because her band is quite wide top and bottom, I had the two options. I could either just get the bias binding, or I could try and find some fabric and cut it on the bias if I could find that colour, which I couldn't, so that's why I'm doing this option. It does save out a lot of time in cutting your own bias binding, but to get it that wide, what I've had to do is join two pieces together and make a seam down the middle. So making sure you've got your good side to your good side. You can just see there the sewing line. And I've sewn just this side of the crease. You can just see where my thumb is there. That's the crease of the bias. And the sewing line is just to the right a little bit of it. So when you open it up, it'll be just a bit wider.
Next you need to measure from the top of your bodice a couple of centimetres over at the end to where the V is, and then measure that out on your bias. Once you've marked that on your bias where that measurement is, what we're going to do now is just do a V shape with a sewing line towards the middle of the bias and then out again.
Next you want to sew your bias on to the top edge of your bodice. The tricky part was the corner just here. I'm just going to turn it over. I actually sewed from one point outwards, but it was a little bit tricky to do the other side, so I'm going to do that by hand. I've managed to sew from here onwards, but it was terribly tricky in the corner, so as I said, I'm just going to finish it off by hand, because it was a bit tricky to get into the machine. Okay, we're now going to move on to the bottom piece of bias, and again I've joined two pieces together as before. This time you want to measure to where your point is going to be, just as you did for the top. And this time you can see we made some little marks, that's to help me. Just going to sew a line from there to there, and then from there to there, which is the opposite as we did before, in which we went from there to there to there. This time it's there to the top, top to there. Okay? Next you want to make sure that you have your shiny side up, which is the outer side, and you want to sew just near the edge here, leave a bit overlapping, just a little bit, and just sew it in place to hold it along the edge. I advise doing this on the machine as you go. I tried pinning it in place, but you end up with problems, so just do it all by hand, very carefully. Okay, I've now sewn the lace along the edge. That's basically just to hold it in place. Okay, next what you want to do is fold it in half. So take the other edge and line it up with the edge of the lace and the other edge of your band. Next you want to sew a good 1/2 centimetre in. Just turn it to the other side. This first line is where we sewed the lace in, and you want to come just this side of the first line of sewing, so you want to sew here to sew them both together. Okay, next you need to clip your curves to allow it to turn inside out in a moment, so just clip up to your sewing line. Do one in the middle, and I've done another one there and another one about there, and the same the other side. This just allows it to bend and lie flat when you've turned it the right way out. No, I'm not ready. Next you want to start turning it inside out, which is a little bit fiddly. Next, get your iron and give it a good press this side where your lace is. Do that all the way along. Next you have to run a gathering stitch about 1 centimetre in from the edge, starting from the top of the lace down to the side. Do that same the other side as well. Make sure you secure your gathering stitch tight to start with, and just run it off the end so you can pull your threads to gather it. Okay, next tie off your ends, just gather them up, and with the threads left over just tie them off and do a few knots to secure it. Okay, the last thing you want to do is to just tack the insides of the sleeves to the liner. Just a few stitches. Just being careful not to go through to your outside. And do that for all of them. The last thing I've done is to put some hooks and eyes on that waist tape on the inside of the bodice. So before you zip it up, have somebody help you attach that around your waist. And then you're more or less finished.